Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. Good time to get out there and play the 23 number on some gigantic jackpot lottery with a million numbers in it that you'll never win. But if you do, don't forget to send a portion of your winnings to my Patreon account at KagroX. Patreon, patreon.com/KagroX. And then, depending on how much you won, give me all of it. And then what I mean is the amount that I'll get from you will depend on how much you win. What a generous person you are. And very lucky. What a great combination. And that's why you're here. All right. Good morning, everybody. Time for yet another show. High schooler, I believe, properly dispatched. Looks like all will go well. And what can I tell you? Let's see. This morning, people are chatting and chattering and things that are landing in my mailbox. You know how reading Daily Kos was always said to be like getting the newspaper early? Well, I got the Daily Kos early, I guess. You know what? I hear something in the background. A news I need to get rid of. A news sound, rather. A sound I need to get rid of. But some news I need to get rid of by dispatching it to you. I see this morning, I have the Daily Kos morning report in my inbox. Minnesota is poised to restore the voting rights of tens of thousands, and I think here we're talking about restoring the voting rights of felons. But guess what? I already know that because Justice Putnam featured it on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy yesterday, although for all I know he read it on Daily Kos and decided to talk about it, and then they got around to featuring it in the Daily Report, Morning Report today. That sometimes happens, you know. We're not original reporters, but it is great to have someone who will read the news along with you in the morning. And then I realized, hey, that would be a great idea for a show. And then I got Greg Dworkin to help us read that news. All right, so he's got his raft of stories ready to go. I suppose, maybe at some point while he's on, I will mute the microphone, run back here, and turn off the air purifier, which is supposed to be off before the show starts. And if you listen carefully, you can hear that gentle hum in the background, and I don't know, it's annoying and it makes it difficult to edit things, and of course, you have to listen to it. You might find it soothing background white noise, though. Anyway, we'll take care of that. We also have some other things to catch up on. Let's see. For one thing, I have a couple of things to delete from my email. You know what? Here's Greg. Why don't we use that as an excuse? Hey, good morning, Greg. How are you? Is the noise annoying you so much that you had to call right away, I guess?
Well, I just thought I'd give you the opportunity to run back and mute and do that.
Thank you.
Because, that's what you were saying. Your secret message, yeah. I got it. I read the
I secretly writing. Want that to happen right now.
So mute it and go do it.
Yeah, all right, I'll go do that right now. And you, can you tap dance near your microphone for just a moment?
There's a couple of things I want to talk about today. And I think what we're going to do is instead of just taking a little micro view of some of the little things that really matter, we're going to step back and take a 50,000-foot view of the electorate and what's going on here. And we're going to do that in two ways. There's a really fascinating article, which I think is going to be key to this, which is a Ron Brownstein interview of Simon Rosenberg. He's shutting down the New Democratic Network, now known as NDN. Oh. And he's going to step back and think about where we go from here, and he's going to talk about why that is. But, to get there, and to get to really setting up the terrain in terms of where we are right now, I think the best place to start is actually with Wisconsin.
All right.
We had this election
there now.
Which I think was important, and it was good to follow it.
Yes.
And
we did.
Janet Protasewicz, who's now going to be known as Janet Pro, I think, for most people.
Oh, yeah?
After
you figured it out.
They didn't grow up in Italian, Jewish, Irish, Polish neighborhoods like we did.
Yeah. With place names with
the debate
American
in my neighborhood was always, is it Mishola Parkway or Moshulu Parkway? It depended upon which end of the Grand Concourse you were at. And, Is it the Kosciuszko Bridge or the Kosciuszko Bridge?
Oh.
And it depended upon, when did your parents come over?
I guess so. Whew. Or whether they like pączki or not.
Yeah. So the whole idea here in Wisconsin, Charlie Sykes was talking to some of the locals, and he was an ex talk show radio host from the area and knows the place well. And, talked about the fact that what the Democrats did on Tuesday is essentially fire up their base, get people in Milwaukee to turn out, get people in Dane County to turn out. The student turnout was astounding.
All right.
There were places they were expecting 25 people. They got 500.
Oh, okay.
At some of the local colleges.
Probably giving away punch.
And, the point there is the thing that really, really mattered is Roe Dobbs. And so the whole talk that you get from media is based on the fact that they get their information by interviewing Republicans. And Republican wishcasters would like you to think that Roe Dobbs' fallout is fading and it doesn't matter, or they're male.
Yeah, well, right.
And just don't get it.
It never made a dent in their heads.
And it never made a dent in their heads, and they still don't get it.
You should make a dent in their heads.
Really, the heads should be dented. And the fact of the matter is, it matters a tremendous amount. And so typically, it's the conservatives who are fired up, and they're the pro-gun lobby, and so on and so forth. And Sykes and his guest talking on the podcast, I don't remember who he was speaking with, but making some great points, is that Janet Protasewicz is going to have a ton of money, and Dan Kelly, the Republican, is going to have a ton of money. But Dan Kelly has already lost that previous race, is already known by Wisconsinites as being a super hyper-conservative, and it's going to be painted as a MAGA guy, because he helped advise the Trump administration on how to pick fake electors. So, he's going to be painted as somebody who you can't vote for the swing voters. And so the deal there is get Dane to come out, get Milwaukee to come out, but look at the WOW counties, Crucial Waukesha and Ozaki and the others, and just keep the margins down.
Yeah.
And they'll do that. Good. And that's looking like a Democratic win, not to count your chickens before they hatch, but the wins are good. And it's all about Dobbs and Roe, and it does matter, and that's the landscape. And so as you go into 2024, well, it's a difficult year for Democrats. Look at the map, this, that, and everything else. John Tester is, in fact, deciding to run. He's no dummy. Incumbents have a leg up, and so that's a big help for Democrats in terms of retaining the Senate. Again, no guarantees, but the point is, whether you're talking about Biden and Biden's chances or the Democrats' chances in the Congress, the fact of the matter is that Republicans are running against headwinds, and those headwinds include, number one, the fact that they did what they did in the Supreme Court, which is to put people there deliberately despite precedent and despite norms, and that was used to gut Roe v. Wade, and people don't like it, and they're still mad about it, and they're still voting about it, and that's part of the background. And the other background is the Democrats stepping back and painting Republicans as extremists, because they are.
Yes.
And so, when all of that happens, that's the political landscape that people are running in. Here's another example. This is Kyle Clark. He's writing coloradopolitics.com and says, quite the quote from former Colorado GOP chair Dick Wadhams on the election deniers vying for the state chair. Quote, all 6 of these candidates are disasters, every one of them. It's just going to be a wasteland at the Colorado Republican Party for the next 2 years. So we're talking about, we talked on the show yesterday, Monday, I can't even remember. But at some point, we talked about the fact that Arizona and Michigan, Pennsylvania, Colorado, these versions of the Republican Party are nuts.
Yes.
And so, you can run against them as being extremists because they are extremists. It's not a difficult thing to pull off.
They actually are going to force you to run against them as extremists by being extremists. I mean, we keep saying that they're painted this way. It's like these guys are jumping in the paint bucket themselves.
They are extremists.
Yeah, right. It's not.
Yes, we can.
There's no painting going on here. We don't need Bob Ross. These guys are declaring themselves to be extremists. Mm-hmm. All right, so we just say, and it's funny too, because remember that in a certain strategic situation, at a certain point in the race, telling everybody that those lunatics were lunatics. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, a couple of months ago, people were gasping, like, you're helping Republicans. You're interfering in Republican races or something. It wasn't that you're helping Republicans, but that you were interfering in race, and this is terrible, and you can't be doing this. And there's nothing I can do. They're all crazy. There are 6 candidates here for chair, and they're all crazy. It's a
right. This was sparked by a story here that says State Board of Ed member Stephen Varela quits the race. He used to be a Democrat, but he's notified the Colorado GOP he's no longer running, leaving 6 candidates in the race, and that means every remaining contender for the top party position wants to close Colorado semi-open primaries to unaffiliated voters, allowing only registered Republicans. And there isn't a single Republican state chair candidate who hasn't promoted unfounded claims that the 2020 election was stolen.
Huzzah.
They're extremists.
That's
all
it.
of them.
Yeah, and I mean, it used to be just that the Republican presidential primary felt that way early on, but now every Republican everything feels that way early on because they're all crazy, and it's like touring the Wonka factory without Charlie Bucket every time.
So Dick Wadham says the party he once led is putting itself firmly crosswise with the vast majority of Colorado voters.
Well, yeah, and as elections go, the way we normally run them, that's a bad way to prevail in an election. Don't be crosswise with the voters.
Right. And you have to remember, we're not talking about Texas or Florida here.
Right. We haven't even gotten to them
yet. We're talking
about
Colorado, where the Democrats actually tend to win these days.
Yeah. I mean, so it's a way to lose elections as opposed to nominate and then elect a crazy person like they did in Florida.
Right. So, that leads to stories, for example.
Oh, good.
This is Aaron Blake, encouraging signs for Democrats in first 2023 elections. And he goes through some of the stuff we went through with the show the other day, much watched primary for crucial Wisconsin Supreme Court, because everything about Wisconsin is crucial. It's especially true if it's about Waukesha County, but, just in general. So right now, he writes, Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasewicz is currently taking slightly more of the vote than the 2 GOP-aligned candidates together. Then there was Virginia forward Jennifer McClellan, your state, winning by 49 points in a district Biden won by 36. In a Kentucky race, Democratic State Senate candidate Cassie Chambers Armstrong won by 54 in a district Biden carried by 30. And in New Hampshire, Democrats head on to a key state House race that was tied. Literally, they had to rerun it, won by 11 when it was a tie. And that comes on top of a trio of Pennsylvania State House special elections earlier this month, which the Democrats significantly overperformed. And so, all of this, is a reminder that the specials last time turned out to be a pretty good predictor, not so much of, who's going to win, but like which way the winds are blowing. And that's why the Charlie Sykes convo about what's going on in Wisconsin, struck a chord with me, because he was talking about the fact that, look, we're just stepping back and seeing what we're seeing, and this is what we see. And the fact of the matter is Democrats are turning their base out, and that base includes younger voters. So all of you people who say, oh, younger voters don't vote, shut up. They do.
Here they come. Yes, and by the way, time for a meme among reporters. Truth social isn't real life.
It's not truth, and it's hardly social.
Yes.
So, all of that is true. So this is the Atlantic article that sparked my interest in all of this. Why this Democratic strategist walked away. Simon Rosenberg delivered a major surprise last week when he announced he was shutting down NDN, the Democratic advocacy and research group he's led since the mid-'90s.
Yes.
Now, apart from a few allies, such as the Democratic data analyst Tom Bonnier, Rosenberg was so alone in his conviction that Politico wrote last summer his proclamations would carry profound reputational risk because history's on the side of big Republican wins this cycle. That's what I mean about, male reporters, blind spot, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Dent in your head.
Right. Time to dent your head.
Right. Instead, after the election, Vox called Rosenberg the guy who got the midterms right.
Okay.
those are hardly balancing things. Everybody said I was doing myself and I'd be doomed professionally. On the other hand, this guy said, yeah, you were probably right.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
So
well,
why walk away?
Equal
then?
Descriptions, right?
Right. Sure. It's the same thing. I think that's what I said. I said you were going to get it right and everyone should listen to you. Didn't I write that?
Yeah, didn't I write that? On MSNBC, Lawrence O'Donnell said Rosenberg was the only person I paid any attention to about polls last year because he was always right. And one host on the podcast, Pod Save America, said, is Simon Rosenberg our God now? And another host said, well, I think so. Now, I wouldn't go that far. I think that's kind of icky. And Natalie Jackson, again, was pushing back. We talked about her National Journal article about, let's not get ahead of our skis here. It's still going to be a difficult environment. The map still favors Republicans. I'm not down on Democrats. It's really important they're doing well in the specials, but it's not a done deal.
Already, but all right, yes, so she was a little skeptical. I mean, if you're playing the odds, it's going to work.
But still, among all of this, Rosenberg shut things down.
Yeah,
and
why?
Ron Brownstein said, "What'd you do that for?"
Yeah, what?
And he said, first of all, two things. I think the age of the New Democrats, which was a very successful political project, is over. The assumption of that politics is that the Cold War had been settled, the West was ascendant. That's not true. China's now a major adversary. Russia's got this war going on. Got to rethink all of that. And what I've been thinking is I need to take a step back from what I'm doing day to day, give this more thought. I want to try to write a book and take perspective of having been part at the beginning of the last big shift in American politics, but this is another big shift.
Okay. I guess.
With MAGA and with everything else, it's just it's a different climate.
He's not
So I think
retiring.
I've been wildly successful, but it's time to step back and see where we're going.
Well, why not? I mean, if you're supposed to be talking about where we're going, it would be wise to have some idea. So, okay, but he's not disappearing. He's not retiring. He's reassessing
just that,
the
when
landscape.
you do the same thing day after day after day, you know this. You have to step back sometimes and say, okay, what am I doing big picture here? And you need time to do that. You can't do that if you're doing your day-to-day stuff.
I do that on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's basically taking a extended Saturday.
All right.
He's trying to figure out what's going on here.
Fair enough. I'll write a book this weekend too then.
And so what he said is, look, part of the reason I'm taking a step back is I don't think we figured out yet how to talk to the American people about the nature of the conflict we're in right now with rising authoritarianism and MAGA and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all that stuff. And my hope is, he said, that because Biden won't be able to legislate, he'll spend his time talking to the American people about the necessity of winning this conflict.
Yes.
So,
he tried that a little bit.
Since, look, you guys took over the House. You're going to try to destroy the country. Yeah, we won't let you, but I'm not going to pass any of my agenda because of you. Right. So I'll spend the time pointing out how you're awful.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
I'm for that, sure. I mean... Yeah, all right. Well, why not why not have the person who
if
read
you want
the
to
mood
go
of
all
the
Harry
electorate
S. Truman on them, that's fine.
Yes. Harry S. Truman, except this time it won't stand for anything, but there won't be, again, a period, but we'll put an exclamation point after the S. Yeah. Just that's how emphatic he is. It's Harry S. Truman. Well, it couldn't hurt to have the guy who got the climate right or the landscape right doing the thinking about it.
So Brownstein says to him, look, we came up to the brink in 2022, but voters said no. And it looks like we're heading back on course. Look at these midterms and so on and so forth. And Rosenberg said, no, the threat's still here. Look at DeSantis. He's even more MAGA than Trump. And the idea that in 2024, Republicans are going to end up with a moderate center-right candidate, he's talking about Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. No. That's just fantasy. It's not going to happen.
No, and
right?
if
basically what he's saying
is
it's either going to be DeSantis or Trump.
Yeah, I can't imagine how. I mean, if you just magically engineered a different, supposedly middle of the road candidate, they would end up swinging right. They'd have to.
And he made an observation which other people have made, but I think again, coming from him who got it right in 2022, it hits home a little bit more. He said, look, we did fine. We gained ground in 7 battleground states, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania. We did great in those places. Extraordinary achievement. High inflation, low Biden approval rating, traditional midterm dynamics. So we still did fabulous.
Okay.
And his view, my view, he says, is that it happened because the fear of MAGA has created a supercharged grassroots. And that's what we talked about in Milwaukee and in Dane County and what's happening in Wisconsin. Unprecedented amounts of money, more labor to work in those races. And where we have these muscular campaigns and a muscular organization like Ben Wickler's in Wisconsin, you can take advantage of it.
Okay.
You don't expect incumbents to lose. You almost beat Ron Johnson, but didn't quite. Mm-hmm. Pretty good. However, outside the battlegrounds, not so good. It was like there was almost 2 elections. New York, California, Florida, Texas, awful.
Wow.
And they're the 4 biggest states in the country. So now it turns out that there's a certain wasted vote, you might say, in some of these places.
I see.
Like if you're looking at the presidential contest, whether you win California 51-49 or 72,
yes, I see.
to 3, you get the same number of electoral votes, so it doesn't matter. But it really matters in the House. Mm-hmm. And New York, arguably, is why we lost the House. So the admonition to us is that we're still not competitive enough in the national daily discourse. The Republicans have this loud noise machine. I remember back in the day we called it the mighty Wurlitzer, and it was starting to wheeze. But actually, Fox News built itself up, got even more ingrained with MAGA world. And so there's 2 things we have to do. We have to build more media institutions, and we're going to have to match that. And the second piece is average Democratic activists have to recognize that they need to become information warriors daily. They need to be on social media saying, that stupid troll is wrong.
Okay.
Little stuff, but you got to do it every day, all the time.
That will be an enormous sacrifice for me. I will volunteer for that role.
Yeah, I've been volunteering for that role for a while, but everybody has to do that.
Yes.
So
also, I'll do media. Here I am.
So Brownstein says, well, let me give you the devil's advocate point of view, which is actually going to be that Democrats are doing better than you say. Isn't there a case that the Republicans' message machine is so powerful as to push the Republican Party toward a politics it can't win? And Rosenberg says, well, one of the projects I'm involved in is a way for Democrats to start thinking about how to get to 55%.
Okay.
In other words, we had a great midterm and we still lost the House.
Right.
And so 51% is just too nail-biting. You got to get to 55. And they still have the Supreme Court. They have the House. There's still a lot of power and potency in MAGA. So you got to defeat them definitively, and you got to move on to declaring and proving, if you will, that the Republicans moved to a different kind of politics, and they're not a traditional center-right political party anymore, where Tim Scott and Nikki Haley have a chance. They're MAGA. Yeah. And so you have to define them as that.
Okay.
And Brownstein said, well, how do you get to 55? And
practice, man.
And Rosenberg said, that's what we're going to, step back and look at. But, the thing is, here's how you do it. There's 4 areas, okay?
All right.
Young voters. That's where Dobbs comes in. But also the whole idea of defending democracy. Student debt, what kind of future you're going to have, climate, the environment.
Okay.
Young voters.
Sure.
Latinos, which is a grab bag of many, many, many different cultures and peoples and places, which needs a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Never MAGA or never Trumpers.
Okay.
My favorite area. That's what I do a lot of time exploring, because I think it's an important segment of the new Democratic coalition.
You can talk to them on social media. That'll be your job, all right?
That'll be my job.
Yes, okay.
Okay, and young women post-ops. Those 4 groups, you concentrate on them, that's how you get to 55.
Okay.
Which means post-Dobbs isn't going away.
Right. I mean, I didn't think it was.
A clear acknowledgement that that's what happened in Wisconsin. That's how Janet Proe did what she did. So the number one job, he said, is we just need more young people voting, period. It's more registration, more communication, targeting them more in our campaigns. In the Democratic Party, young people are still at the kids' table. They have to become the center of our politics now, which is a really nice way of saying, the old people really have to move out of the way and let them participate, let them lead.
Well, that's that might be part of the reason why. I wonder whether he woke up one day and said, I've been at this new Democrats thing for like 30 years.
Yeah, we should rename it the Old Democratic Network and let some new people do this.
Right. Or something like that. Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's It's ironic, and I'm sure he's conscious of it. Well, I'm like the oldest guy in the room leading the youngest voters here.
Your fellow kids, right?
Yeah. Well, that might be the reason. So I'll write a book, and we'll use the clout that I still have among Democrats to raise the money to start a new organization, maybe with a different voice.
Right. So Ron Brownstein says, so give me one more shot at it.
Right.
Why did we think that there was a red wave and what really happened?
One column. Okay.
And Simon Rosenberg says, well, I look back at what happened. I go back to something we've been discussing, which is the power of the right-wing propaganda machine to bully public opinion, including all of those fake holes. And I think there was never a red wave. And there needs to be a lot more public introspection done by those of us who do political analysis about why so many people got it wrong. The only way you could believe a red wave was coming is if you just discounted the ugliness of MAGA. You had to get to a place where insurrection and candidates Republicans are running were somehow things that really weren't important to people. Well, eggs cost 30 cents more, so that's like far more important than the fact that Dobbs removed your bodily choices.
Yeah.
Really? Like none of that matters? Like January 6th didn't matter? You really have to come to, well, we're so cynical, we think so. Okay. Well, that's how you get it wrong.
I guess.
So roll all this forward, Brownstein says, are you comfortable with Democrats relying on Biden running again? And Rosenberg said, yeah. I think Biden's running. I think we're favored. So, get over it.
All right. Well, yeah, you should probably get over it at this point. Okay.
Maybe he won't run. We don't know. But, it's not doomed just because he's running. Yeah, he's old. But that doesn't mean you can't motivate the young. Look at me. I'm stepping down. Other people should do it too. Not Biden, but others. and let Biden
some other old people
mentor Kamala Harris. Why not? It's great.
It would be probably pretty good for everybody, including her. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and you notice a nice quiet background now for the last 20 minutes or so, maybe even more, since Greg came on early.
Well, the point is you didn't notice.
Yeah, well, hopefully, it went without too much notice. But now, now
people are having withdrawal. I can turn on my washing machine.
Okay, yeah, there are plenty of fun noises that are sometimes part of the background.
Abby
here.
can come to visit.
Right. We don't have Coke cans opening up in the background anymore, but that's because we kicked the morning Coke habit, so that's good.
Right. So there's a smorgasbord of things here I wanted to talk about. I just thought looking at that whole big picture was kind of useful because to me it just puts Wisconsin in perspective, what happened in Virginia and what happened in those elections. And those elections are important. And yeah, I think we do have to concentrate on the youth vote, but the idea that that's a waste of time is just ancient history. It's just not true anymore.
All right.
They're motivated. They come out. I saw a couple of tweets during Tuesday which were talking about college areas.
Yes.
Which were getting set up to help students vote. And one of them, I think it was in La Crosse, said, we were set up for 25 people and 500 showed up. We ran out of paper. We sent for more. We ran out of that. They all waited. They all voted. That's what we're talking about here.
Pretty good. And, Republicans striving mightily in some states, of course, to do everything they can to shut down college campus voting, student voting, etc. But, one of the fronts, and an important one in the fight for voter access and against voter suppression. So
here's one from Jennifer Rubin. Wisconsin Supreme Court primary signals Democrat strength.
Okay.
Liberal Wisconsin Judge Janet Protasewicz simply trounced her competition in the four-way race. She won roughly 46% of the vote, which is pretty good in the four-way race.
Yes, it's tremendous.
Okay. Although she reiterated she couldn't promise how she would vote as a justice, she left little doubt about her values. I value a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions with her doctor, family, and faith. Okay.
Okay.
On partisan gerrymandering, she said, I also value our democracy, and I think every Wisconsinite deserves to be fairly represented.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Well, that's good enough, though.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, like they have to, they're practiced at it. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but here's the things I believe in, and you might find that they align more or less with what you thought.
You remember the suggestion that perhaps Daniel Kelly is not a guy you should really fall in love with, her opponent?
Yeah.
So Jennifer Duro, who presided over the trial of a man who plowed through a Christmas parade, killing 6 people, was the favored conservative in the primary because of name recognition, but Dan Kelly, aided by a boatload of PAC money, went viciously negative on Duro.
Well, that's easy to do.
In a sense, it didn't matter which conservative pulled in more votes, Jennifer Rubin writes. Both reflected the increasingly extreme views of the state GOP. As Janet Pro told her supporters at an election night party, I'll be running against somebody who doesn't think women in Wisconsin should be able to make their own health care decisions, somebody who won't hesitate to put extreme partisan beliefs ahead of the laws of our state. So Democrats were delighted. Ben Wickler, the Democratic State Party chair, told me in a brief phone interview Tuesday that Protasewicz's performance soars beyond all expectations. According to a Democratic official, turnout was 21% of the voting age population, the highest for a Supreme Court race in a decade. And this was a primary. Given the competitive race between right-wing candidates, GOP turnout should have exceeded the turnout for Protasewicz, and it didn't. Protasewicz also won areas of the state that are normally heavily Republican. The reality is abortion so profoundly personal, it resonates across party lines, Ben Wickler said. So it's going to be the most expensive, of course. One of the other points that Charlie Sykes made with the person he was talking about is that the money doesn't matter anymore. So much money, it doesn't, it all cancels out. Everybody's going to vote how they want to vote. Now, not how much money is going to be spent on an ad to define somebody you've never heard of. Everybody knows everybody. It's done. You don't need to spend $1 gazillion, unless you want to spend it on get out the vote. And Democrats are better at that.
Yeah, well, the money will be spent anyway. I understand the billionaire U-lines are behind Kelly.
Right. So they'll have money.
Money will be a factor.
But money won't be the issue. Of these issues, abortion is clearly the issue driving Democrats' momentum. More than 60% of voters in the state want to see it legal in all or most circumstances. Given that pro-choice forces won every abortion-related referendum last year, including Kansas, Democrats remain optimistic U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn abortion rights will continue to fuel Democratic anger. That's the point Simon Rosenberg was making, and therefore political engagement. Because you don't vote when you really like somebody and you're happy. You go out and vote when you're pissed off.
I guess so. Well, that's interesting. The 60% want to keep it. It passes the Hastert.
60% are pissed off.
Come on. Okay.
Right? No single issue, and certainly no U.S. Supreme Court decision in recent memory has so catalyzed the Democratic base while attracting support from independents and even Republicans, and even in purple Wisconsin, where a victory by a few points amounts to a landslide, protecting women's autonomy seems to have become a unifying issue. And Republicans can deny that all they want to.
Yeah. Well, it is a disaster for them, and that's a great thing, and I don't mind that. I was reminded as I was thinking about you reciting all of that, though, that there was a time way back when, where people used to say, well, the Republicans aren't really serious about this stuff because they'll never do it because it would be such a disaster for them
never
to
cut
do it.
Social Security or
and so,
Medicare.
Yeah, I mean, it's true
Or the
you were
Defense
right
Department
about the
budget.
fact of how big a disaster it was for them. But,
Or Obamacare.
you know, you should realize that, I mean, I guess if you're still having difficulty convincing yourself that they're all crazy and they're all lunatics, consider that, everybody thought it would be suicide for them to do it, and so therefore they wouldn't do it, and they got up on the stage right in front of everybody and did it regardless. So you were right about it being a disaster. You were wrong about their having the self-awareness not to do it because it would be a disaster. So everything else that you've depended on all these years, as you just listed, Social Security, Medicare, same thing. Will they do it? No, it would be a disaster. Well, really, the answer now is they will do it and it'll be a disaster. They might do it because it'll be a disaster, and they love disasters, but the old way of thinking is out the window.
When you step back and again,
hey,
look
that's
at the
what
bigger
Simon's
picture
up
here.
to. Yeah.
I have a reasonable feel for politics, and I can get local stuff, and I sort of understand the motivations for why people do what they do, sort of. I just absolutely cannot fathom why, fill in the blank, the 79th Circuit of the, the D.C. courts or whatever, has decided to take this extreme view that is so unpopular that they're going to push through anyway, even now, after everything. It goes to the Fifth Circuit, it goes to, and you go, what are they doing? Why are they going to do that?
Yeah, I guess they live in bubbles, I guess, as was also predicted to be a big problem. Everyone around me says either don't worry about it or it's the right thing to do anyway, so don't let the polls guide you or whatever it is. I guess you could ignore the polls, but at the peril of not being a voice that anybody cares about because you lose all the time.
Mm.
So, like you always say, you have to win in order to make policy.
You do.
And then when you make policy, if the policy makes you lose, then your policy will be reversed.
Right.
So,
now, real world consequences of all of this, a reminder that the Proud Boys trial is still going on. We don't know how that's going to work out.
That is a long time.
It's been in 25th day or something like that, in the 20s. And it's going to go longer, I think, than the Oath Keepers did. And I think it's going to be a more complicated trial. But they've got the guy who turned state's evidence on yesterday and today.
Okay.
Who's saying, this is how it all went down. Yeah, we really were serious about this. Yeah, we really wanted to hurt people and get there. And we considered it a failure if they went and they met that night. And they wanted to get Peloton. That was their code word for Nancy Pelosi.
Peloton?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, it was all encoded because it's all super secret, double secret.
Sure. Right.
Cracker Jack, Spock's, decoder ring stuff.
All right. So they had a code name. That's very cool and tactical.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you hope you will be.
So that's going on, reminding people, there are extremists. And here's another.
Yeah.
And this is in the Washington Post. Arizona's top prosecutor.
Yes.
At the time, Mark Brnovich, concealed records debunking election fraud claims. Newly released documents show Republican Mark Brnovich publicized an incomplete account of his office's probe of the 2020 election in Maricopa County.
Yes.
Investigators prepared a report
General.
stating virtually all claims of error and malfeasance were unfounded, according to internal documents.
What do you know?
But he kept it private.
Yes.
And then he released an interim report claiming his office discovered serious vulnerabilities. He left out edits from his own investigators refuting his assertions. So basically, as Attorney General, he just out and out deliberately publicly lied to the people of Arizona. This is the Republican Party in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it was interesting just hearing commentators talking about such things as, did you hear that Tucker Carlson's going to have access to all of the January 6th videos because Kevin McCarthy gave it to him?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's bad, of course. But what was interesting is that after the Dominion case with Fox News, which revealed that the people at the top, including Ingram, Carlson, Sean Hannity's of the world in Fox News world, knew that they were lying to the people they speak to, didn't care, and did everything that they did because they were worried about ratings more than anything else in the world.
Yes.
Okay. So, like, what's the implication of that? Well, we would like other news organizations to not consider Fox News news, because that's not what it is.
Right.
And what I was interested to hear is that when people were mentioning Brnovich's lying to the public and the implications of releasing that January 6th material to Tucker Carlson, people were pretty flat out, crystal clear about this. The problem with giving it to Tucker Carlson is he's a proven liar.
Well, that's one of them.
And now it's like everybody's saying that.
Yeah, that's good news. I'm pleased to see that. And to me, the whole Dominion lawsuit thing is great new ammunition for the people who have always said you shouldn't be admitting Fox to the White House press briefing room.
Yeah, you shouldn't have them at the news table. Put them at the kids' table where they belong. Put them over there with, One News Network or whatever it is, or Newsmax.
Well, they get a seat in there sometimes too.
Or Russia Today, because that's where they belong.
Certainly kick them out of the front row. And it's all of that evidence now is added to the pile for that.
They should ask a question that you want to ask. You want to be in the back row and ask, and the White House should say to you, "Well, we're not going to talk to you because you just lied to your customers."
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why they couldn't get away with doing that. And the idea of giving all this material to Tucker Carlson, I mean, particularly Tucker Carlson, that he should get it, but also the idea of just giving it to anyone at all exclusively. This is public documents, essentially. This is apparently the videotaped public record of what at least was captured on cameras, and that might not always be 100% of the picture, for one thing, something to keep in mind. And then, of course, if you edit it selectively, it'll just be worse. But this is a public record. Kevin McCarthy can't just say, I'm taking public information and I'm giving it not only to not everybody in the press, but to Tucker Carlson alone. And he'll tell you what there is to be distilled from the public record. That that doesn't belong to Kevin McCarthy.
He promised. At the same time, the Democrats can release it to.
I promised to rob Fort Knox. Oh, I'm delivering on a promise. You can't arrest me for this.
Right. So it's really stupid. But again, you could write a great essay in a magazine behind a paywall about how this is bad. But my point is that, no, just like normal people are saying, well, why are you giving it to Tucker Carlson? He's a liar.
Well, right.
That's way more important.
Yes, that's true. But like everybody was enjoying the brand new fun angles that C-SPAN was allowed to use, and everybody wanted to talk about that. I was like, well, don't give C-SPAN exclusive control over the cameras either. You don't want that. There's a big whole mess behind that as well. Yes, mine would be the secondary issue. And I think, look, as long as people are upset with Tucker Carlson, good, use it, fine. Let's dent his head. Just so that he understands what's going on out there. Right. We want just, facts to get in there. That's all I'm saying.
Right. We're not the Proud Boys. We're not advocating that you actually physically dent his head. It's just that it's a metaphorical dent. It's a metaphorical hole in his head.
Yes.
Where all the integrity.
Even the head may be metaphorical. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway. So there's that going on. There's a interesting piece Peter Wehner has in The Atlantic. Marjorie Taylor Greene's Civil War. The Congresswoman is too influential within the GOP and too representative of its views for her calls for secession to be dismissed.
All right.
So don't just turn your back. She's giving voice to a widespread and growing sentiment in the Republican Party. Among Republicans in the South, for example, support for secession was 66% in June 2021. According to a Brightline Watch YouGov poll.
That's because they stopped teaching them that they lost.
Right. Then there's Texas. And so Civil War-like secession isn't going to happen, but all the emotions that are attached to a desire for it, seething resentment, existential fear, unforgiving spirit, contempt, hatred for those who disagree with you, they're all stoked by the kind of rhetoric employed by Greene. And again, I would add, you're seeing it in the Proud Boys trial.
Mm-hmm.
So this stuff's real.
Right. Well, hang one, and there'll be less of it.
And don't expect a wave of Republican lawmakers and current and potential presidential candidates to get on the secession bandwagon. They're still too extreme for most of them, at least right now, just like cutting Medicare and Medicaid is, even though they want to.
Yeah,
now they're forced to
Roe v.
deny
Wade.
it. But I doubt that many Republicans, aside from courageous figures, and the names he names did do this, such as Utah Governor Spencer Cox, Liz Cheney, called Green out and said this is crazy and ridiculous and repugnant. So did Mitt Romney. So did Larry Hogan.
Well,
but by and large, if Republicans call Green out, they will offer only gentle rebukes. Mostly they'll want to ignore her comments, change the topic, and say, well, really, it's the Democrats' fault for making us feel this way.
All right. Well, I'm trying to help Simon organize a new organization for normies. Let's have less Larry Hogan condemning her and more Hulk Hogan condemning her. How about that?
Yeah,
Will that work?
Now, simultaneously, and this is a piece by multiple authors in the Washington Post, Trump's grip on the Republican base is slipping even among his fans. More than 150 interviews. This matches some of the Bulwark interviews that we were talking about the other day. In pivotal electoral states show the former president maintains a bond but faces rising interest in a new standard bearer, which happens to be Ron DeSantis. But the interview one, for example, says, I and a lot of other Republicans who were supportive of Trump are becoming less and less supportive, not because I'm a never-Trumper. I just don't believe Trump's the best person to move this party forward. That distinction is reshaping the Republican base. The MAGA versus Rhino dichotomy is pretty much obsolete. They're all MAGA now. That's not the point. The point's who can win. In its place, a new dynamic emerged from interviews with more than 150 Trump supporters across 5 pivotal electoral states. And in between Republicans who remain firmly committed or opposed to the president, there's a broad range of Trump supporters who, however much they like him, aren't sure they want him. And the foremost reason is electability.
Okay.
So when you hear them say, I don't know if really Trump is the person who should be leading us, they're going to turn around and say, it's DeSantis. He'll screw the liberals even more. So
maybe.
Don't be
fooled
by them. But they're a different group than the former Republicans who are now independent / never-Trumpers, who are my favorite group.
Right. They too would say DeSantis is just as bad. They would recognize that. And there's also every chance, it's way early, there's every chance that, normally, I guess, with a more normal candidate, I would say people come home at the end, they express doubts, and then October comes around and they say, I'll vote for the guy I usually vote for. So that could be Trump. I guess if they're handed or they hand themselves DeSantis, it will be DeSantis. But they'll come around for Trump if he finds himself winning the nomination.
Right. I think Trump still, has the edge over DeSantis for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
But still, DeSantis beat Trump 64 to 36% in a hypothetical one-on-one matchup in a Marquette Law poll last week. And the way people are looking at it, I just find it fascinating. It's not the first time Trump supporters have admitted their misgivings, but during his presidency, the only choices were with him or against him, so they stuck with him.
Yes.
The W view of the world is their view of the world. Everything's black and white.
Yeah.
And they're white.
That's true. And
and it drives everything.
They'll set it up the same way. But at that point early on, DeSantis wasn't really ready to, come out and declare himself.
And he's still probably not ready for prime time, as we saw when he came to visit New York. Yes. The foremost reason, though, is electability, they write. Even Republicans who said they still supported Trump and believed his false claims that the 2020 election was stolen acknowledged doubts on whether he could defeat Biden. Or another Democrat.
I guess.
They put so much doubt and mistrust into people's minds, he might have a hard time winning, even though I'd still vote for him.
He managed to get the election stolen on him that time, so
but you got that
get
foot
it stolen on him
you
second
got the foot in the door of, okay, so maybe he's not the best choice, even if it's for the wrong reasons. That's something.
Okay.
They're not going to vote for a Democrat. These are the kind of people who might, in fact, stay home. So I'm encouraging that.
Sure. Have to think of a way to make them want to do that.
Yeah, and whereas Trump has this deep bond because he is Archie Bunker and they are him, DeSantis's bond with voters interviewed also appeared pretty loose. Many just called him Florida guy.
Yeah. They may not really have any idea.
Suggesting they were still persuadable
Exactly
for Trump or
who he
somebody
is.
else. And Trump, by contrast, brought out a uniquely firm commitment with some subset of voters. We don't even think about it. There's no plan B.
All right.
Right?
Well, keep running those pictures of him in the Smurf boots.
And the point there is forever Trumpers who say they won't vote for anybody else form the bedrock of Trump's enduring power in the GOP, an implicit threat that the party can't win without him. What I'm saying is I would love to see the GOP split over him, and it's not impossible.
That would be great. And just by the nature of things, the split will occur that much closer to his eventual death, and then what happens?
Right. It's going to be a tiny minority of people in the Republican Party who say, I will vote for Trump, but nobody else. So if he's not the nominee, I'm not voting.
All right. Well,
But you look, the difference between 51 and 55, as we were talking about with Simon Rosenberg in the first segment, that's 4%. You only need a few.
okay.
If 3% of the Republicans say, well, if Trump's not the nominee, I won't vote. Great.
Yeah. Fine.
I'll take it.
That's what we should be measuring is among the various candidates on the Republican side, which one has the highest number of people who say, if it's not my person, I won't vote. And I think everybody would guess it's Trump right away.
So this Sarah Longwell focus group series that we have covered here on the show from the Bulwark, both things can be true, she says. A majority of the party can want to move on, and enough of a plurality is so dug in they won't.
Mm-hmm.
Ron DeSantis or other Republicans, they got to figure out how to chip away at that. So, all of these reporters said there's nobody else who can generate enthusiasm and excitement like Trump, which is why he's support from top elected officials, grassroots leaders, said Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case going forward. So, again, something to keep a close eye on. I just think it's fascinating how the dynamics there work. Because if you're a forever Trumper who sees that Trump can't win, and winning is everything, how do you get from point A to point B? What do you do? How do you tell yourself it's okay to vote for somebody else?
I don't know.
And
maybe
can
you
convince yourself to do
really
that
don't.
in time for the election.
And then you sit around saying it was stolen from him in the primary instead of the
and
general
where does that
this
leave
time.
you?
I don't know. And then he runs as an independent. It was stolen again. He got 9% of the vote.
Well, that means you're not a Republican, and you're not voting for the Republican.
Okay.
And that's okay. I'm all right with that.
That's true, especially if it also makes you, disinterested in the rest of the Republican ticket for the rest of the, for your trip to the voting.
Right.
To the
and then
polls.
finally, the Los Angeles Times has an interesting piece about how Ron DeSantis is not necessarily ready for prime time. The Republican Party can't decide if it's for Ukraine or not. They have a big picture of DeSantis. And as he broke from the culture wars to address Ukraine when he was in New York, that's part of he's not ready.
Yeah.
For years, Joe Biden has told audiences, this isn't your father's Republican Party. And he's right. And perhaps nothing better illustrates the shift, says Jackie Collins in this piece, than the party's eroding support for America's global role as leader of the free world and its embrace of Vladimir Putin. Russia's year-long war on Ukraine is the crucible that will test which strain could come to define the 21st century Republican Party, traditional internationalism or America First isolationism. Let's hope it's a former, but, no guarantees.
Okay. And it's a 9-year-old war, but okay.
Right. So
I make that mistake too.
As Biden walked a Kyiv street with President Vladimir Zelensky with air raid sirens screaming, which was pretty impressive, Donald Trump sent out a fundraising email, said Biden puts Ukraine before America. Hoping to pick the pockets of small donors in his America First corner, Trump charged that it was Biden who was fleecing them. He loves sending your dollars to secure other countries' borders. Instead, right, send them to me.
Right.
I'll build a wall. That's what I'll do.
Which I won't.
I won't.
I'll keep that money too.
Yeah.
Okay. He's terrible. By the way, I was just thinking about that as you were saying, with walking the streets with the air raid sirens going. And I'm thinking of the pictures of Lindsey Graham and John McCain walking streets in Baghdad, but doing it in the body armor
Right.
Which I don't know. I think they might have thought it made them look cool or tough or something. But
yeah, it was Mike Dukakis in the tank stuff.
Yeah. Didn't work out very well.
Didn't work out very well. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley's saying, no, we got to give Zelensky everything he needs to win. It's not really, I mean, the Republican Party is so divided.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, she was
House
a UN
divided
type.
Cannot stand. It just, this is why the political winds are really not favoring Republicans at this particular point in time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying they can't win. Can they get it together in time for the 2025 race? Sure. Can they coalesce behind somebody? Yeah. However.
Yes.
Numbers don't necessarily predict the future in the House. Given Republicans' narrow majority, the lawmakers of the pro-MAGA America First persuasion have sway. All week, they posted on social media and ranted on Russia-friendly Fox News that Biden's an embarrassment on the world stage. None of which is true. Voters don't see that. They see him walking the streets with Zelensky with air raid sirens going on.
Yeah, and the rest of the world, I mean, forget it. The opinion as between Biden and Trump, the world opinion of the United States because of their president is through the roof.
Right.
So, how can it not be?
It's quite interesting. You can there's a lot of stories floating around about how Ukraine fatigue is increasing, but actually, as you read the stories, what you realize is Ukraine fatigue is increasing amongst Republicans.
Yeah.
It's the usual, only what Republicans think matters. Right? Fatigue is spread among the voters because people like DeSantis and Trump and MAGA world push it in part because they're pro-Putin and in part because they're funded by Putin.
Yes. Although they did have a head start on their Ukraine fatigue. Before everybody knew that we were going to have to aid the Ukrainians, the Republicans were working hard behind the scenes to not aid the Ukrainians. Yeah. So they've been at it for longer than the rest of us.
I wonder why they're taking Russia's side. Let's ask Paul Manafort.
Yeah. He perhaps he has some idea.
Perhaps he has some idea. So, again, it doesn't mean that that's what the country wants to do. Mm-hmm. But, let's just say, without getting too conspiratorial about it, there's still a lot of Russian meddling going on in the Republican Party that they haven't fessed up to.
Yes, right. Although maybe they're paying more people now, thanks to.
Yeah. Speaking of paying people, the gift that keeps on giving, George Santos is still with us. Reported spreading campaign cash to other Republicans, but when you look at the finance reports from the Republicans, he says he helped. They never got any money.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't report getting money from him either if I could help it.
I know, but he's a crook. He took the money, he pretended to spend it, he kept it for himself.
Cool. I mean, ordinarily, I'd say we need more of that.
A small piece of a large picture of a grifter.
Yeah, I mean, all right, I'd like to know exactly what was going on there because, it wouldn't be a terrible thing to seed the ranks of Republican donors with fake Republican donors who don't pony up the money in the end.
Yeah, but it's one of the things on the list I sent you. In any case, hopefully my computer will be back by Monday, but maybe not. I'll tell you when I see you. Take care and keep the noise down in the background there.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's hurry up because there's not enough time left. There's only an hour, and we got to get to all these things. There's so much to cover. And I can't decide, but I think I will decide based on what's on my screen right now. I was thinking, do we want to go back? I want to go back. And I want to read through the Washington Post story about Mark Brnovich. It's I can't tell whether it's going to be extremely important or not, but it should be. I mean, they should be stringing this guy up. I mean, you have somebody who's the attorney general who abuses their position and power as clearly as anyone can. And yet we have this grand tradition of not really punishing people. If the power they abuse is high and mighty enough, we just say, boy, that's terrible. Let's report how much abuse there was. And then it'll probably never happen again because we've put it in the light of day. But I mean, it seems fairly significant, and yet, what can I tell you? It's getting attention, but I don't know. It should be setting more hair on fire, I guess. But since we already knew that Arizona was A, chock full of nuts, and B, that they lost, and see that in the background, everybody kind of, the normies of the world now view the so-called forensic audit, the fraudit, conducted by cyber ninjas of all people. That too, a real branding issue for them, and just the naming. And they really, if they had just been, XYZ Associates, no one would have paid any attention to that. But the fact that they were cyber ninjas really didn't help them any. But so everyone sort of discounted that. All right, yeah, well, they tried their stupid thing and they lost, and all the candidates who believed in it lost, and so we're fine in Arizona, but put it aside. But you should, like January 6th, when you peel the onion, it gets worse and worse and worse. And you probably cry more as well, just like an onion. Arizona's top prosecutor concealed records debunking election fraud claims. That's the headline given to it in the Washington Post. Yvonne Winget Sanchez and Isaac Stanley Becker have the byline. Newly released documents show how Republican Mark Brnovich publicized an incomplete account of his office's probe of the 2020 election in Maricopa County. In other words, that he lied not only about what went on, but lied about what evidence he was able to gather and what it showed. It's a tremendous issue. Nearly a year after the 2020 election, Arizona's then Attorney General, come on, Mark Brnovich, launched an investigation into voting in the state's largest county that quickly consumed more than 10,000 hours of his staff's time. That's 10,000 hours of your money's worth of their staff's time. Investigators prepared a report in March of 2022 stating that virtually all claims of error and malfeasance were unfounded, according to an internal document, to several internal documents reviewed by the Post. Brnovich, a Republican, kept it private. Let's keep it quiet. We're all family here. That's how we know we're family. We lie to everybody and wink at each other. In April, the Attorney General, who was running in the GOP primary for a U.S. Senate seat, thankfully, again, this is why people put it aside. Well, he didn't win. He didn't even win the primary. Blake Masters, who by some accounts is perhaps worse, but think about that. Your choice for a major political party, supposedly a major political party in this country, although they're increasingly working like Hezbollah, which is not recognized as a major political party in this country, but they had the choice between this lying a-hole who gave the finger to everybody in Arizona and around the country by simply saying, well, I'm the Attorney General. If I say there was meddling, then people will, on my side anyway, will believe there's meddling, unless, of course, it gets out that there wasn't meddling and I was lying. And they can usually contain that for some amount of time. But I guess the truth always comes out in the end. But what are we doing about it? People are still waking up and listening to Fox News, even though this happened in the Dominion lawsuit. It happened. People just tune it out, whatever. Anyway, I'm really incensed about this one. In April, the Attorney General, who was running in the GOP primary for a U.S. Senate seat, released an interim report claiming that his office had discovered, quote, serious vulnerabilities, when in fact not only had they not discovered serious vulnerabilities, they had discovered that there were not many vulnerabilities at all. Those that were there were not serious, and there was no actual evidence whatsoever of any of the things that he was going to claim were totally true anyway, and that's why you should believe me. I'm the Attorney General, and in fact you should send me to the United States Senate. And I guess you could mop your brow and let out a sigh of relief that you didn't send him to the United States Senate. But you instead attempted to send someone even worse, and you should mop your brow that that didn't work either. Okay. Well, at any rate, so he claimed that his office had discovered serious vulnerabilities. He left out edits from his own investigators refuting his assertions. His office then compiled an election review summary in September. By the way, I guess I'll pause again to say, as horrible as this is, where do you think he learned that? Could it possibly be from the fact that the Mueller investigation and the report was sent over to the White House, and that the Attorney General of the United States of America put out an interim report, a summary of what was in the report and totally lied about what was in the report and reached the opposite conclusions of the report, but put on his attorney general suit and tie, went out there, told the press that the opposite was true, and the press said, the attorney general says the opposite's true. It was later reported that he was full of it, but why they didn't say, this is an outrage and he should be strung up by his thumbs afterwards, I don't know. It's just people don't say that, I guess, in the press because reasons. And, and I guess because if you did that, people would be strung up by their thumbs possibly. And we're not supposed to be into that. But I don't know. We don't seem to be able to hold them accountable in court. So I don't know what to tell you. We love the founders. They're fantastic people. They were a little brutal, though. And despite the fact that they gave us the Eighth Amendment, they got around to, remember, Greg is always telling you got to win the elections in order to run the policy. Well, in order to give us the Eighth Amendment, they had to run people out of town literally on rails. They had to tar and feather local governors sent over by the crown. That stuff burns. It's hot. That's torture. They threatened, killed, and exiled many, many people in order to bring us the Eighth Amendment, which we're stuck with now. But as you know, well, actually, the Constitution turns out it is a suicide pact. I found out. Apparently, the Second Amendment is full of suicide pact, so we're stuck with that too. Oh well. Anyway, I got to get back to the reading of this. Right, Brnovich's office compiled this election review summary, just as Bill Barr faked one up about the Mueller report. And he did it in September. That report or that review summary systematically refuted accusations of widespread fraud and made clear that none of the complaining parties, from state lawmakers to self-styled election integrity groups, had presented any evidence to support their claims. Brnovich, though, left office last month without releasing that summary. What do you know? So it's a little bit of, I said it was like the Bill Barr play, but it really wasn't. Bill Barr just faked up a summary and said, but when the Mueller report was completed, I'll do a summary and I'll tell you what it says and set the narrative. But he had already done that with the interim report. They also filed an election review summary when the report was finally done, and they realized, no one was willing to write a lie of an election review summary. So, and Brnovich, I guess, couldn't be bothered to do it himself, so instead he just didn't release that thing. And he stuck with the interim report, which was, I guess, his version of the Barr summary. That is to say, that's the opportunity that he took to come out and lie about what was going on in the report. So, the timeline emerges from documents released to the Washington Post this week by Brnovich's successor, Chris Mays. I don't know how she pronounces she. Yes. It's a K, Chris. So I took a quick guess, but isn't Chris Kobach? Yeah, I think he is. Anyway, Mayes is the last name. Mays. I don't know. Anglo Mays or Latino Maes. I don't know. It's not really a Latino name, but that's how you would say. Okay. But Chris. All right. So we'll go with Mays. Well, that's one of the fun things about being the successor, right? You take over all of the files from the previous attorney general, which is supposed to be a check against attorneys general doing dumb stuff like, why don't I prepare a report that lies? And if you prepare a report for me that doesn't lie and I suppress it, I can only suppress it as long as I'm attorney general. And then when I'm not, it'll come out that I suppressed it. So there you go. Although, I'm sure Kevin McCarthy and Republicans right now are saying the same thing about the January 6th videotapes, but at least they're videotapes. I mean, I suppose you could edit them. They will, and they'll chop them up, and who knows? They could deep fake them at this point. We'd never know until after the fact. But anyway, an interesting parallel there, just in terms of taking over the office and releasing the information. Anyway, so Chris Mays said that she considered the taxpayer-funded investigation closed, and earlier this month notified leaders on Maricopa County's governing board that they were no longer in the state's crosshairs. That's good for them. The records show how Brnovich used his office to further claims about voting in Maricopa County that his own staff considered inaccurate. They suggest that his team privately disregarded fact checks provided by state investigators while publicly promoting incomplete accounts of the office's work. The innuendo and inaccuracies circulated not just in the far reaches of the internet, but with the imprimatur of the state's attorney general, helped make Arizona an epicenter of distrust in the democratic process, eroding confidence in the 2020 vote, as well as in subsequent elections. And by the way, in light of this, congratulations to the people of Arizona who nonetheless did the right thing and voted the right way and rescued themselves from certain disaster in the 2022 elections and hopefully beyond. You still have something to do over there. You got some work to do with Kirsten Sinema. But hey, Brnovich did not respond to questions about his conduct of the probe, his decision not to release the additional documents, or differences between his public statements and his office's private findings. He's just not saying anything. Well, you'll talk if you do string him up by his thumbs. Maybe he'll say something. The documents, 2 investigative summaries, and a draft letter with edits totaling 41 pages are far from an exhaustive record of Brnovich's investigation, but they fill in details about the sometimes enigmatic actions. Enigmatic. I wonder why he's not releasing anything. Is it because the report doesn't bear out any of the things he said? Yes, is the answer. They fill in the details about the sometimes enigmatic actions of the state's former top law enforcement officer. And again, you can't stress that enough. He's in one of the highest positions of trust there is when it comes to the rule of law. Remember when Republicans used to stand outside and chant rule of law, rule of law? Yeah. Anyway, Brnovich quickly affirmed then-President Donald Trump's loss in Arizona in November 2020, angering fellow Republicans. So no wonder he had to go so hard to swing things back. And he went on to resist Trump's efforts to overturn the vote. Yet he flirted with claims of fraud as he courted GOP support over the subsequent 2 years, trumpeting his interim report on a far-right radio show and saying, quote, "It's frustrating for all of us because I think we all know what happened in 2020. So he's just like Tucker Carlson. In the initial aftermath, he knew what was going on and said it was all a bunch of lies. And then when he wanted to run for Senate and realized he needed MAGA support, he swung the other direction and signed on to the fraud bandwagon. Anyway, it was only in the final days before this past November's midterm election, several months after Brnovich had lost his Senate primary, that he began to denounce politicians who denied Trump's defeat, calling them clowns engaged in a giant grift. So he went back and forth and back again. In releasing materials that Brnovich's office had kept from public view, Mays, said that she was reorienting the work of the Attorney General's office away from pursuing conspiratorial claims of fraud and toward protecting the right to vote, investigating the few cases of wrongdoing that typically occur every election, and preventing threats against election workers. The people of Arizona, in other words, she's discovered, as the rest of us have, that every Republican accusation is a confession. And if you really want to investigate things accurately, take their claims and turn them around and look for Republicans who have done that thing, and you will find that your efforts will bear fruit. The people of Arizona had a right to know this information before the 2022 election, Mays said in an interview. Maricopa County election officials had a right to know that they were cleared of wrongdoing. That's true, too. And they are Republicans in many cases. And every American had a right to know that the 2020 election in Arizona, which in part decided the presidency, was conducted accurately and fairly. The records released this week represent a fraction of the thousands of pages produced by investigators and attorneys during the investigation, including additional material from drafts of reports and interviews and correspondence with witnesses and election officials. May's staff is reviewing these documents and is redacting sensitive information before making them public in the coming months, said Richie Taylor, her spokesperson. Brnovich did not release the investigative summaries, which the Post requested under Arizona's public records law before he left office in January. Brnovich and his staff said repeatedly throughout the investigation that they were limited in what they could disclose since the probe was ongoing. But his office did on occasion make public some aspects of its findings. On August 1st, the day before the state's primary election, Wink, wink. Brnovich said his office had finished its investigation of allegations that hundreds of votes had been cast in the name of deceased people. His office found one instance. In December, as Brnovich was preparing to leave office, an executive assistant wrote in an email to the Post that regardless of transition, we will continue processing and we will release when completed. Okay, well, they didn't. The 2020 election in Maricopa County drew intense scrutiny because it's the state's largest voting jurisdiction, home to more than half of its voters, and helped swing Arizona to Joe Biden and deliver him the presidency. Brnovich launched the investigation shortly after Cyber Ninjas, a Florida-based firm hired by the GOP-led state Senate, ended its own review of the election in September of 2021. So that's kind of an important point, too. Cyber Ninjas, as bad as they were, also reached the conclusion that there wasn't any real evidence. And Brnovich said, oh, well, that's the wrong conclusion. I'll start my own investigation with the aim of delivering what Cyber Ninjas couldn't, except he also couldn't deliver it, but pretended that he did. The months-long investigative review, which was roundly criticized by election experts, affirmed Trump's loss in the state. Brnovich was competing at the time in the Senate primary contest against Trump-aligned candidates who said they would have taken steps following the 2020 election to thwart certification of Biden's victory, even though that was the wrong thing to do. And illegal. The Attorney General's probe stretched through 2022 as Brnovich's office spent more than 10,000 hours examining claims of irregularities, malfeasance, and fraud, records show. At one point, the office set up a command center. Command! That's the sort of center it was, very commanding. And the review of the audit was made a singular, high-level priority. All hands were assigned to work exclusively on reviewing the audit, with other matters being placed on hold unless a matter required immediate action on our part, a report said, which means that the Attorney General's office of the state of Arizona was asleep to everything but this fraud, a fraud of their own making, during this period. All those 10,000 hours, none of it was spent on border issues or prosecuting criminals that they had caught. Everybody, all hands, apparently. Okay. Well, Mays said the office has about 60 investigators, all of whom participated in the probe at some point, along with lawyers and support staff. By September of 2022, a year into the inquiry, the Special Investigations Section had received 638 election-related complaints and deemed 430 of them worthy of investigation. Of those, just 22 cases were submitted for prosecutorial review. 2 cases involving felons who illegally sought to vote were prosecuted, leading to convictions. Look out for the people who were once in jail who now would like to re-enter society and become responsible citizens by voting. Let's make sure that they go to prison. In the meantime, the Attorney General, who lied to everybody and undermined democracy nationwide with his shenanigans, he's walking around free. But the people who got out of jail and said, you know what, let me be an upstanding citizen for once, they're back in jail. That's a great result. Brnovich never broadcast the full findings, declining to close the books on suspicions raised by an interim report with characterizations directly rebutted by his own office. The interim report, delivered in the form of a letter to Karen Fann, then the Republican president of the state Senate, was met by Trump allies as confirmation that voting in Maricopa County was corrupted. It wasn't. The letter sent on April 6th highlighted management of early voting, saying, we can report that there are problematic system-wide issues that relate to early ballot handling and verification. But Brnovich's staff took issue with his criticism of the handling and verification of ballots, writing in a draft of the letter, we did not uncover any criminality or fraud having been committed in this area during the 2020 general election. The staff comments were made in blue type, I guess. Then they show us a picture of this page here. In blue type, below disputed statements highlighted in yellow. I see. Blue type, below disputed statements highlighted in yellow and included in a document sent by a chief special agent in the criminal division to several others in the office on April 1st. I guess I ought to read you what that says. So again, the staff comments are in blue type. They appear below yellow highlighted statements, which are disputed. And this picture here. We'll pick up with the first complete sentence that says, that responsibility falls on the Arizona legislature to enact laws that, quote, secure the purity, of elections and guard against abuses of the elective franchise, citing Arizona Constitution Article 7, Section 12. Now, the disputed statement highlighted in yellow reads, our overall assessment is that the current election system in Maricopa County involving the verification and handling of the ballots is broke. I think they mean broken, but that's what it says. That's a disputed statement and not just for the poor syntax. Now, the staff comments in blue read, investigators examined the policy and procedures followed by the MCRO, I guess Maricopa County Records Office, recorder of some, I don't know, MCRO, relative to signature verification. Okay. SIS, I'm not certain what that is, but Secretary of State sounds like the sort of thing, but I don't know. SIS is not Secretary of State, but I don't know. SIS staff concluded the MCRO followed its policy/procedures as they relate to signature verification. So, investigators said that there was a problem with the signatures, or somebody alleges that there was a problem with early ballots, and they thought that the big problem was signature verification, but as it turns out, all procedures, in fact, followed. We did not uncover any criminality or fraud having been committed in this area during the 2020 general election. They very often in these things say no significant fraud. This they just said we didn't find any. No criminality or fraud. Okay. But the Arizona legislature can take immediate action. Oh, the report goes on to say. But anyway, that's the disputed line and what the staff had to say about it. But they didn't include the staff stuff. They just went with the highlighted yellow stuff and ignored the staff comments, which, again, it's just an example of them completely contradicting what's going into the report. So the staff comments, as I told you, made in blue type. We've just read them. That document was forwarded to Brnovich's top aide. The subject line was additional considerations for draft interim report. It's not clear who else reviewed the document. The considerations were largely not reflected in Brnovich's final version. Brnovich speculated that a large number of early ballots in the 2020 contest may have prevented county officials from properly verifying signatures on the ballots, even though his staff advised him that the county had rigorous training and processes, as well as additional staff to ensure proper verification. Brnovich went ahead with his claim that Maricopa County had not always timely and fully responded to our requests for records, even though staff advised in the draft document that it was the collective opinion of investigators that the county was cooperative and responsive to our requests. That section with its yellow highlighting and blue comments is displayed herein. When Brnovich released his interim report, it was not accompanied by a fuller investigation summary prepared by the Assistant Chief Special Agent and dated March 8th. So there was one, he just didn't put it out. The 24-page summary described a range of allegations probed by the Attorney General's office, including improper signature verification, misuse of drop boxes, and incomplete access to records for the state Senate's audit. That report was also shared with Brnovich's top aide. Taylor said virtually all allegations had been deemed unfounded, according to the summary. Several issues were listed as undetermined, including a claim by cyber ninjas that certain files had been deleted by the county. Investigators had yet to review all archived data. The summary revealed that there had been procedural violations in one instance involving the retrieval of ballots from drop boxes. The state did not find that the county had mishandled ballots, according to the summary, but that it had not always properly recorded certain details, such as the time of retrieval. Well, now you have something. Regarding signature verification, the issue highlighted in Brnovich's interim report, the prepared summary said, no improper election procedures were discovered during the signature verification review. Later last year, Brnovich's office came to further conclusions about the absence of any basis for claims of systemic fraud, but it kept those findings private as well. And I guess, they could be saying, well, sure, you say that no improper election procedures were discovered, but that is to say they followed the book to the letter, but you could claim the book is wrong and the procedures are inadequate. I suppose that's still an area for contention, but they don't even do that homework. On September 19th, about a month after Brnovich had lost the GOP nomination for Senate to a MAGA-aligned candidate who insisted that Trump, quote, Trump won in 2020, a memo summarized the work of investigators. The memo, drawn up by a chief special agent in anticipation of a final report, was not shared with office leadership since no such final report was ever drafted or requested, Taylor said. The memo, entitled Election Review Summary, emphasized that no evidence of election fraud, manipulation of the election process, or any instances of organized/coordinated fraud was provided by any of the complaining parties. Once again, all the people who would go to these meetings and scream at the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and the Elections Board had, in the end, no evidence for the things that they were screaming about. Of the more conspicuous claims, yes, examined by investigators, including those circulated by Cyber Ninjas, Texas-based True the Vote, and others, the groups did not provide any evidence to support their allegations, the memo concluded. The information they did provide, quote, was speculative in many instances, and when investigated by our agents and support staff, was found to be inaccurate, as is so often the case with these things. Astonishing.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio, where I guess we'll have to keep going on this. I've committed to this article, but I think it's fairly important to parse our way through this. Where we left off, of course, was yet another restatement of the essential problem, which is to say that all of the complaints made by conspiracy theorists who said the election were stolen turned out to be false and certainly unprovable, and that they never even bothered to come forward with real evidence of what they were talking about. It was all just conjecture, as it had been the last time, by the way. I was reminded of things. Oh yeah, right. What was it we were reading about? The Roger Stone article, and one of the recommendations from, who were we reading? I can't remember which of the pieces we were reading. It was, all right, Jenny Cohn's piece, where she had recommended a certain video view of the Brooks Brothers riot, and it kind of it was part of television coverage, many years later, when I guess they included scenes from the HBO movie on the subject, right? Which I can't remember the name of anymore, but a dramatization of what was going on. But one part that I thought was fairly interesting and important, and may or may not have been, I don't know whether this was like historically accurate, but it was truthy enough. But there's this one scene, which I guess it's based on the testimony of one of the Palm Beach that they did this in county, or was it Broward County where this happened? Broward was where the riot was, right? but Palm Beach County had the butterfly ballot. That was different. But yeah, right. So in Broward, I guess, when they were counting and they wanted to, I don't know exactly. I forget what they were trying to do, but, one of the commissioners went to the, part of the office where they store such things and said, can you give me a sample ballot, a blank sample ballot? And I guess they use those things to, examine the nature of the ballot themselves. And I don't know whether they were trying to recalibrate the machines or, make sure the machines were running correctly and run a test. And you use a blank, uncast ballot, that's not real and might not even have been an actual ballot from the 2000 election. It might just be blank, whatever, like a blank Scantron sheet. But at any rate, there was a totally legitimate reason for asking for this thing. And the Republican observers, the Republican operatives and staffers who had been sent to be observers and who eventually participated in what became the Brooks Brothers riot, one of them observed this withdrawal, this authorized withdrawal of a sample ballot for tabulation, not for using it to count, but for, I guess, calibration purposes. But I can't recall exactly what it was, but it was, again, legitimate purpose. It's established by the testimony and portrayed as such in the movie, but they just see the handing over of a paper that looks like a ballot. And the observer just shouts out, this woman who's observing just says, he's stealing a ballot. He's stealing a ballot. So everybody hears that, jumps to the conclusion that she's correct, she having jumped to the conclusion that he was stealing a ballot. And they basically physically assault him in order to prevent him from getting back into the office and continue the work. And that's, I don't know, that's essentially the sort of operation here. Like, people watched ballots being collected from drop boxes, and they see a person, whatever, you just get that kind of conjecture. Somebody puts the ballots in to the bag and one of them falls to the ground. And so they pick it up and put it in the bag. But the observer either misinterprets what's going on or just lies about what's going on and says, oh, he pulled a ballot out of his boot and stuck it in there, but no, everyone would say one ballot. Who cares? He pulled 25 or 100 ballots out of his sleeve and put them into the bag. Or, the people that they watched, they're removing suitcases of ballots pre-printed in China from underneath the table, right? They just don't understand what they're seeing. So they make these crazy accusations. So when they try and, so you put investigators on it and they track it down and say, no, it's nothing of the sort. All right. The memo also reported that some high-profile Republican officials who had publicly made fantastical claims of fraud did not reiterate those assertions under questioning by agents when they were subject to a state law prohibiting false reporting of law enforcement or to law enforcement. So when you're on a Republican talk show, you say, oh yeah, 1 million ballots were printed by the Chinese. You can tell by the bamboo fibers in the paper. And it was definitely using Italian satellites to totally change the vote total. When they got there and they said, so tell us under oath, basically, under penalty of lying, of perjury, when you tell an investigator, tell me the story that you told on the Republican talk show so we can investigate it. Oh, well, actually, as it turns out, I don't have anything to say on that score. Mark Fincham, then a state representative who later ran unsuccessfully for Secretary of State, had repeatedly claimed that a, quote, source told him that more than 30,000 fictitious votes had appeared during the general election in a county south of Phoenix. Oh, well, I'm running for office. I'm running for Secretary of State, so I can control these things, and I can make up evidence that this happened if necessary once I win that. But in the meantime, I'll just tell you 30,000 fictitious votes. Really? So along come the agents and they say, so tell us about the 30,000 fictitious votes. When questioned by the agents, though, he did not repeat the claim, specifically stating that he did not have any evidence of fraud and that he did not wish to take up our time. Fincham provided 4 ballots that he said reflected a flawed voting process, but those ballots had not been counted and were unopened. So, Mr. Loudmouth, I was told that there are 30,000 fictitious votes, he told everybody. Along come the investigators. Tell us where did you hear about this 30,000 thing? Can you repeat that for us and tell us where to go to look? Oh, yeah, I don't really have anything for you on that. I don't have any evidence of this. I mean, I don't know. It was a thing I heard. Well, who'd you hear it from? I don't know. I don't have any information for you on that. Big talker. And yet, so he didn't want to get in trouble for lying to the agents, but he should get in trouble for being a giant a-hole and have the crap kicked out of him. Basically, in Trump world, that's what he would ask for. And people would do it too. But in the meantime, he's just going to, You remember, I was the guy who found out about the 30,000 fictitious votes. Yeah, say it again. Tell me about it. I'm an investigator. It's still his claim to fame, though. I bet he still says it in speeches, just as long as there's no investigators there taking his statement. Sonny Borelli, a GOP state senator who had alleged a cover-up of election irregularities, did not repeat those claims during an interview, but did provide what he said was the name of a deceased voter. I found out about the name of a dead guy, the memo stated. Investigators learned that the allegedly deceased voter was alive and had not voted and was not a resident of Arizona. How crazy is this? Sonny Borelli running around saying, I know about dead people who voted. All right, I'm an investigator. Tell me, what was the name of this dead person? John what? Smith and Jones? John Smith Jones. And he's dead. When did he die? 2020? 21? The guy's, I found out about a deceased voter. He's not deceased. He's not a voter, and he doesn't live in Arizona. What is that? What kind of garbage is it? Here's Wendy Rogers, the other idiot. Investigators sought a meeting with Wendy Rogers, a Republican state senator and vocal election denier who now chairs the chamber's elections committee, of all things. But Rogers refused to meet, the report said. She said she was waiting to see the, quote, perp walk of those who committed fraud during the election. Well, I'm waiting to see the perp walk of those who committed fraud after the election by saying that there had been fraud in the election. And none of them will speak to investigators. That's the perp walk they're avoiding. But there's still tar and there's still feathers, and somebody got to walk these guys into the tar. Whatever they do, they don't even dunk them and they pour it over their heads. This is crazy. These people just continue on with their lives, making mischief wherever they go, and you can't hold them to account, because when you send people who can hold them to account, they shut up, they clam up, or pretend they didn't know anything. No perp walk resulted from allegations presented to the unit, including that aerial objects flipped votes. Aerial objects? What? That election workers scrubbed hard drives, or that satellites under the control of the Italian military penetrated vote counting machines. I thought that would be the aerial object they were talking about, but I guess not. Aerial object, I don't know whether that's UFOs or now a balloon craze. I got no idea. No accountability for any of these people, because every time they try to put them on record and make them accountable, they clam up and won't say the thing. But I think they should, I don't know, shouldn't there be some way of prosecuting these people for these public statements? But I guess there isn't, because thanks again, Suicide Pact, we're not allowed to prosecute people for their First Amendment statements. It's true. But I don't know, some anonymous people could pour tar over them, feather them, and take pictures and circulate them on social media. But that's assault, so don't do that. All right. Just saying, assault was good enough for the founders, and I guess just not us. Okay. That's fine. That's a fine collection or conclusion after a crazy story like that. Okay. There's a couple of other things that I definitely need to share with you. And one of them is the report that made it, among other places, to the New York Times yesterday, that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump have been subpoenaed in the January 6th investigation, thanks to the special counsel. The special counsel overseeing the inquiry into Donald Trump's efforts to retain power after the 2020 election wants the former president's daughter and son-in-law to testify to a grand jury. We'll see what happens. Maggie Haberman and Michael Schmidt teamed up for this one. You know the story. By the way, of course, friends say they are privately appalled but that never means anything. And they didn't even buy. I don't think they even trotted that line out here, but we'll see. Anyway, Ivanka and Jared have been subpoenaed by the special counsel to testify before a federal grand jury about Trump's efforts to stay in power after he lost the election and his role in a pro-Trump mob's attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to two people. Who are these people? Briefed on the who's been briefed on the matter? The decision by the special counsel, Jack Smith, wink, wink, to subpoena Ms. Trump and Mr. Kushner underscores how deeply into Mr. Trump's inner circle Mr. Smith is reaching and is the latest sign that no potential high-level witness is off limits. Not that they'll all show up, but anyway, it'll be fun to see whether she decides, does Ivanka think she has executive privilege? Or maybe she thinks she was president of the Senate at the time. I don't know. The disclosure about the subpoena comes 2 weeks after it was revealed that Smith had subpoenaed Pence to testify before the grand jury. Pence plans to fight the subpoena, invoking his role as president of the Senate to argue that it violates the speech or debate clause of the Constitution. It's unclear whether Trump will seek to block Ivanka and Jared from testifying on the grounds of executive privilege, as he has tried with some other witnesses and generally lost, and so why would you try again? But he thinks every case needs to be tried over again. Both of them served as White House officials in the Trump administration. Mr. Trump declined to try to stop them from testifying before the House Special Committee that investigated the January 6th attack and what led to it. An aide to Ms. Trump and Mr. Kushner did not respond to a request for comment. That's interesting that they used the same aide, considering that they'll both have varying claims on the executive privilege side. Anyway, Josh Stuvey, perhaps, a spokesman for Mr. Smith, declined to comment. Aides to Mr. Trump also did not respond to a request for comment. Let's see. Ivanka was in the Oval Office on January 6th as her father placed a late morning call to Pence to try to pressure him to block or delay congressional certification of the Electoral College results. Let's see. As president of the Senate, Pence, who rejected Trump's demands, was to serve in a ceremonial role overseeing the process that day. Ivanka also accompanied her father to the rally of his supporters at the Ellipse near the White House. Hundreds of his supporters moved from there to the Capitol, where they attacked the building, some chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," for his refusal to do what Mr. Trump wished. Kushner returned from the Middle East that day, ultimately going to the White House after the pro-Trump mob had been rioting for hours. Both he and his wife were involved in efforts to get Trump to tell the rioters to go home and then to commit to a peaceful transfer of power to Biden. Both testified before the January 6th House Select Committee, appearing for videotaped interviews in which both provided memories about that day. The committee, in return, repeatedly played the clips of their testimony at some of its public hearings. One clip that got considerable attention showed Ivanka making clear that she accepted Attorney General William Barr's declaration that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in the election, despite Trump's repeated claims otherwise. That sounds familiar. Trump was infuriated by the clips and what was said in them, according to people in contact with him. Since then, Kushner and Ms. Trump, who relocated with their children to Florida after they left the White House, have maintained family contact with the former president. But while Mr. Kushner appeared at Trump's campaign kickoff in November, Ivanka declined to and put out a statement saying she would not be involved in her father's campaign this time. Both were intimately involved in his 2016 race before going on to work at the White House. In December, Trump posted on his social media site Truth Social that he did not want them to be involved in his third campaign. Contrary to fake news reporting, I never asked Jared or Ivanka to be a part of the 2024 campaign for president, and in fact, specifically asked them not to do it, Mr. Trump wrote, going on to say the campaign would be too mean and nasty. There's never been anything like this ride before, and they should not be further subjected to it, he added. Not proud enough of his upcoming campaign to allow his own family to be involved. But of course, he won't stop Don Jr. because he actually hates that kid. Anyway, moving right along with just a couple minutes left here. Yes, what else do we want to, I was thinking about maybe we should spend a little bit of time on this secondary argument about how dumb it was for McCarthy to give Tucker Carlson exclusive access to the January 6th riot footage. There's the basic article reporting on the fact. I don't know whether they raise any of these issues in the Washington Post, but I have, in addition to this, we've got a Substack to read from Jay Quo, who is an attorney and a political scientist, I guess. And I don't know. Let me read you his Substack bio. Admitted before the Supreme Court. Before the Supreme Court did what, we might ask? Before the Supreme Court and Ninth Circuit. AB in political science from Stanford. This is going way back. I mean, you don't really need to tell us about your bachelor degree if you're practicing Supreme Court attorney, but he's JD from UC Berkeley, board member, Human Rights Campaign, CEO of The Social Edge, and composer of Allegiance on Broadway. So a varied career for Jay Quo, who writes about this. Kevin McCarthy just gave Fox News a huge gift. Democrats and other media companies need to hit back fast. He, I think, takes partially, anyway, the tack that I was discussing earlier. But let's see what else he has to say here. Another news story broke yesterday, he said, as he wrote this on the 21st, on Axios that shocked many in Congress, the media, and in legal circles. Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and that wasn't the shock, but that he was Speaker, who has long argued that the public ought to be allowed to see more security camera footage from the January 6th attack on the Capitol, released some 41,000 hours of it, but did so exclusively to not just Fox News, but exclusively to Tucker Carlson at Fox News. According to the reporting, Carlson's producers are already digging through the tapes and will be airing selected excerpts in coming weeks. Said Carlson, there was never any legitimate reason for this footage to remain secret. And last month, Speaker McCarthy signaled that he was in favor of the tape's release, stating to reporters in Statuary Hall that he thinks the American public should actually see all that happened instead of a report that's written on a political basis. Now that the initial WTF moment has passed, there are some critical questions we should all be asking, as well as legal actions that Democrats, the media, and civil rights groups should soon take. Let's review the history and context behind the far right's push for more January 6th footage, and then walk through why it is such an unprecedented and egregious move by McCarthy to hand the tapes over to Carlson and Carlson alone. First up, the footage of the attack. That's the section title here. Congress, and specifically the January 6th committee, have had access to tens of thousands of hours of footage from the attack on the Capitol. They combed through it in preparing their final report and made part of that footage available during the January 6th hearings, where they aired clips. Prosecutors from the Justice Department have also had access to the security footage, while defense counsel for the insurrectionists charged have been granted access on a limited basis, especially to footage that prosecutors intended to present in open court. On the January 6th committee was bipartisan, but had no members of the far right on it. This made it the target of extremists and led to unfounded charges of a broad conspiracy to hide, quote, the truth from the public. Tucker Carlson, for example, has argued on his show as recently as January of this year that this is all part of a, quote, regime of secrecy and deceit, unquote. He has tried to push a counter-narrative that the violence at the Capitol was just, quote, a forgettable minor outbreak by recent standards, unquote. This echoes statements by radicals in Congress like Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia, who famously compared the riot to a normal tourist visit of the building, even though he allegedly screamed in terror and barricaded a door when his own life was threatened by attackers breaking into the House chamber. With possible indictments of key Republican figures in the coming weeks and months relating to January 6th, not the least of whom is the former president himself, the far right is eager to get out ahead with its own counterfactual narrative that the insurrection was peaceful, patriotic, and infiltrated by deep state operatives, actually carried out by Antifa, and also no big deal. None of this is supported by the footage as a whole, nor are these ideas even internally consistent. But facts and logic don't matter so long as Fox News can plant irrational doubts and continue to, quote, just ask questions so that its viewers won't grasp the truth. Well, let's see. We saw it with Barr summarizing the Mueller report and misdirecting everybody. We just saw it with Brnovich summarizing the findings of his report and misleading everybody. And now they're going to do the same by summarizing the video and misleading everyone. Great. As Aidan McLaughlin of Mediaite noted, on January 6th, Carlson had initially expressed alarm about the attack, as the texts to his producer that day demonstrated. Those were only made public recently in Dominion Voting Systems' defamation case against Fox News. Carlson wrote that Trump is, quote, a demonic force, a destroyer, but he's not going to destroy us. Then on air, he described the attack as a storming of the Capitol building. But in the weeks and months that followed, it says Tucson, which I think means Carlson, but it's a good name for him. Tucson began a nonsensical portrayal of the attack. It was part of a network-wide effort to win back viewers who had fled to more right-wing outlets. Carlson described the assault as a, quote, nonviolent election justice protest and suggested to viewers that the entire thing was a false flag. Now, Carlson may seek to use his exclusive access to the footage to continue to feed these conspiracy theories, keep his viewers wanting even more, quote, evidence to support their false beliefs, just as he did with his bogus claims about a stolen election, which he knew to be untrue. Section 2 here, the reason for heightened caution and release around the tapes. There are awfully good reasons that lawmakers and courts have been careful not to permit wholesale release of the security footage. The tapes would show, for example, the locations of all the security cameras on the premises, as well as their capabilities, including their specific abilities to tilt and rotate. The footage would also, importantly, show emergency escape routes used by Congress members during the attack. In the hands of nefarious actors who credibly might attempt another similar attack in the future, such information would be extremely useful, although they are very often very dumb and maybe not capable of using it. Let's hope, because the tapes are out there now. Indeed, had it been in the hands of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who organized and led the assault on January 6th, they may well have succeeded. Even more lives would have been lost, with our entire democracy threatened by hostage takers and executioners. Former January 6th committee spokesman Tim Mulvaney blasted McCarthy's action. It's hard to overstate the potential security risks if this material were used irresponsibly, he said in a statement to CNN. When the January 6th Select Committee obtained access to U.S. Capitol Police video footage, it was treated with great sensitivity, given concerns about the security of lawmakers, staff, and the Capitol complex. Mulvaney noted, access was limited to members and a small handful of investigators and senior staff, and the public use of any footage was coordinated in advance with Capitol Police. In the January 6th defendant cases now being tried or pending, the CCTV footage has been tightly controlled by a protective order, and defendants are expressly not permitted to publicly release portions of the footage. Once the capabilities of a U.S. Capitol interior surveillance camera, including its position and whether it pans, tilts, or zooms, is disclosed to the public via the release of a single video from that camera, the cat is out of the bag. Justice Department prosecutors wrote in a July 2021 court filing. McCarthy's move to hand Carlson and Fox News all of the CCTV footage greatly increases the likelihood that a public release of the video footage could occur. Outside of the context of educating the public around the violent nature of the attack, as well as the need for fairness in permitting accused insurrectionists to mount informed defenses, there is no compelling need for the media to have full access to the tapes, especially when weighed against the known security risks. That a single media outlet, one which is known to play footsie with those same insurrectionists while openly promoting falsehoods about the election, should gain full and exclusive access to the tapes is beyond dangerous. Next up, Democrats fire back. Let's see what happens. The former chair of the January 6th committee, Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, minced few words as he condemned the move. If Speaker McCarthy has indeed granted Tucker Carlson, a Fox host who routinely spreads misinformation and Putin's poisonous propaganda, alliteration, yay, and his producers access to this sensitive footage, he owes the American people an explanation of why he has done so and what steps he's taken to address the significant security concerns at stake. Former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Adam Schiff, who McCarthy had removed without cause from the committee after assuming his speakership, echoed Thompson's deep concerns. Kevin McCarthy turned over the January 6 videos to right-wing propagandist Tucker Carlson, a man who spews Kremlin talking points, suggests January 6th was a false flag, and spreads the big lie. Make no mistake, this isn't about transparency. It's about fueling dangerous conspiracy theories. But strong words alone, of course, aren't going to stop Fox News. We'll read just a little bit more as we exit today's program. The release of tapes just to Fox is likely illegal. Let's quickly get that on the record here. It doesn't take much to understand right away that in a free and liberal democracy, the leader of the Republican House majority in Congress ought not to be providing a treasure trove of highly sensitive security footage to just one network in the name of transparency. A fully transparent release would be made instead to any and all members of the press who have requested the tapes. McCarthy's move sounds more like the environment that state-run media enjoys and not a robust marketplace of competing media outlets. Moreover, these tapes, which belong to the American people, have a great deal of value to broadcast networks that are able to selectively air them. Fox News and McCarthy both understand how they would help the network's ratings and keep viewers glued to Carlson's false conspiracies. When the government favors one press outlet over another or gives something that belongs to the American people and is of great value to one network and not another, this implicates the First Amendment directly. And it's not hard to see how this move runs afoul of it. McCarthy is effectively suppressing speech by only allowing a favorable media outlet to have access to the raw footage. I expect other media companies to howl and protest and immediately move to have equal access to the footage. But that legal challenge might take time, which is why Fox News is likely furiously trying to stitch together what it can before its exclusive access is halted by the courts. A temporary restraining order would be the best move, filed right now, to stop Fox News and McCarthy in their tracks. I honestly hope one is soon forthcoming. I have not heard anything about them in the days since he wrote this on the 21st. It's just a few days ago, but you'd like to see some movement on that front if you could. And if you don't, well, maybe you'll like to see some movement in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy front coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman,
where he'll be taking up the topics like Marjorie Taylor Greene's national divorce, which would obviously be disastrous for red states, whatever red states might mean. Also on the rest of the menu, 3 Oklahoma Republican lawmakers called for a moratorium on the death penalty in Oklahoma amid growing concerns about the state's brisk pace of lethal injections. Stay tuned.